how this relates to the videos I shared about these coaching sessions is if you haven't seen them yet, you will see how dogs express confusion in different ways. And I thought it was really fantastic to see how Lexi really is obedient. She's fantastic. She's just going to keep working and keep trying to figure out what Janet wants. And yet she was working really, really slow because she was unsure about what they were doing. And that's kind of an exaggeration of the same thing that happens with any dog that is unsure, unclear, on course, that isn't the type of dog that expresses it as big, hairy, like barking and spinning and sniffing and running off and grabbing obstacles. That dogs like Lexi and Ziggy and Dakota and Lil actually are those kind of dogs that they express confusion by slowing down just a little bit. And if you don't notice it and you don't then offer more support, over time that little bit of slowing is going to be a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more. And it's going to happen so gradually, you're not going to be aware of it until like a year or two later. You're going to think, why aren't I winning anymore? Why, my dog used to be the fastest dog when we ran clean. What's going on with that? And then you'll have to reflect back on the subtle notching down and of their speed. And Sue Sternberg, I think the way she used to word it is, she'd say, each dog is born with a certain number of forgiveness points or forgiveness somethings. I'm not sure points was what the term she used. And each time we overface our dog or make a handling error and then call them off the obstacle after it was our mistake. And anytime we lie or deceive our dogs through bad handling and then trying to fix it versus letting him take the off course that we sent him to, that we are using up one of those forgiveness points. And at some point the dog is going to shut down. But these really resilient dogs, like the ones I just mentioned, they can do it for years and just slowly, gradually get a little bit slower. So the challenge I have to all of you who have these types of dogs that if you were to describe them, you'd say, no problems. My dog stays with me, works with me, doesn't have big hairy performance problems, we do well at trials. I challenge you to see, can you up your dog's level of enthusiasm and see how that expresses. And I believe that in most cases it expresses as visible joy and more speed, more confidence. So Karen Cornwell, she's saying, interesting to see the body language of the dogs in the videos. Yeah, it was great to have so many dogs there being able to contrast and compare them. And I thought it was particularly interesting to see the last dog, Vinny, the Mr. High Drive drool at the start line, that you could see how forward leaning he was. And it was this expression of forward thinking. And that is his big hairy problem, is that he is so into what's coming next that he can't remember to do what is under his feet right now. So that can result in drop bars, dogs not paying attention to striding, right? Got to make some stride adjustments between jumps, missed contacts, breaking on the start line is a big one, all of that. So it's a great, the video is a great way of noticing that these physical expressions are just that they're not the cause, they are the effect of the mindset of the dog. So Lexi was very timid. Ziggy was kind of acting like Phil, right? Phil was being kind of erratic and high energy and then doing stuff, and Ziggy was kind of doing that too, and then kind of pausing, going, what are you doing now? I don't understand it. So there's also a bit of mirroring that happens, like Janet's a really mellow human being. And so I think also some of that is, Lexi mirroring that. And for Janet to bring forth more drive and enthusiasm from Lexi, she doesn't need to change who she is. Janet does not need to become all of a sudden an excitable cheerleader type of person. It's just a raising of her own energy in the way that she does it. And being a dynamic handler, versus being like you're waltzing with your dogs. And I hope it's okay that I'm going to keep going back into these bonus runs. It may not relate to everybody, but there's something so important here that a lot of bonus handlers will tend to move in a very regular, rhythmic way. There might be a tight turn like this of the shoulders, but their feet aren't doing dramatically different things. So there's not like a punchy step and a little step and a lean back, that it feels very rhythmic. And so the dogs mirror that by being very rhythmic versus punchy, like exploding, and then collecting in a dramatic way. So the dogs just get into this loping thing, which is really exaggerated by the fact that Nadec courses are all supposed to be more or less evenly spaced at 21 feet, so the dogs can kind of go 1, 2, jump, 1, 2, jump, 1, 2, weave. They can get very kind of like that. So in the case of the big distance handlers, it's a challenge to create a lot of dynamic and changing styles of motion or energy for your dog, but you can play around with this using just mark buckets and hoops at a park, or mark buckets in a couple of trees. You can do 3 mark buckets like see in the video, and maybe have a tree at one end so that you can go mark, 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 send around a tree, mark, 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 do all this stuff. And just start getting a feel for how you can be like energetic in a way that you want your dog to match this changing energy level that you are projecting, versus being very bland and the same throughout your practice. And if any big distance handlers want to share, short videos of examples of being bland compared to examples of being dynamic, please share them. I think people would benefit. So going back a little bit to why we do what we do, why we can get caught up in accuracy versus enthusiasm. And whoops, my computer just turned off. I want to keep an eye on here. Both screens. Is if you think about the way agility organizations, like how they offer us cookies, we humans cookies, it's going to create different decisions, and it's going to be hard to fight the decisions we make because of how the cookies are distributed. So in the United States, that you don't have to win to move up to the next level, except in snooker forget it. That's a very minor point. In one organization, you have to get certain types of cues to get your championship. But in all the rest of them in the United States, you don't need to win. You just need to get X number of qualifying runs, and then you move up to the next level, and X number of there, and move up, and finally you get your championship without ever having to have won anything. So it's setting us up to want to go for consistency over enthusiasm. And AKC kind of has a double whammy on that, because they have this thing called you need like 20 double Qs, which means you need to get a qualifying run in standard and jumpers on the same day, which I do very little AKC, but I did enough to go, oh my God, that messes with my psyche. Like if I get the first one, all of a sudden I've got pressure to get the second one. And if I didn't get the first one, now I'm like all bummed out, like, oh, I have no chance of getting the super Q. So instead of feeling like, oh, I had a 50% Q rate, got one run, didn't get the other, there's a feeling of, I got nothing at all. So I think they're doing a disservice to teams and dogs by having that way of earning their championship mock title, but I'm not trying to change that. I'm just, it keeps me from emphasizing AKC. I don't do much AKC because I don't like what it does to me, and it's really hard to buck that inner trend that makes me want to get the double Q, even though I don't care at some level. Crazy, right? But in contrast, in Europe, and I don't know if this is true in Australia, New Zealand, and other countries, but you have to win. So basically, everybody from the very beginning is going for it. And what does going for it do? If you're fair to your dog, going for it is develops enthusiasm and speed. Now, if you're not being fair, then it can, of course, create all sorts of confusion and frustration and chaos. But in the very best of worlds, I would say going for it creates enthusiasm and speed. Because I know if I'm going for it, that's what I get. And my consistency might drop a little, but it's a lot more fun for me. It's a lot more fun for my dog. So let's see. One other thing I want to bring up that messes with our heads. Human beings designed all the agility obstacles. Human beings designated what height the dog needs to be and what height that dog should jump. All of that is kind of random, and it's changed over the years. And there have been scientific studies that show for agility dogs that there's a certain jump height that is, optimal, and it's, in the range of their withers. And then there's another one that is quite low below the withers that is also optimal, but there's this in between that is not optimal. And I have actually found that to be true with Dakota and probably with Lil as well. That so my point in bringing that up is if your dog is struggling at a jump height, there's this tendency to want to keep your dog at the official height, because otherwise you're in the skilled or the preferred or the performance, which is considered this is not as good. And I definitely, understand that feeling myself. I mean, Dakota is in the main level and he jumps 22 inches in USDA well. And, I may eventually drop him down just to get a lower A-frame, but I do have the feeling that he should be jumping the height of the main, the championship level just because he can. But a lot of dogs, I think, would benefit from going down 4 inches due to structure, due to the inability to load well, or for whatever reason. And yet the titles are called something different. It is, there's a little bit of a looking down on that. And that's really a shame, because when NADAC changed, their 2 title tracks to a single title, meaning you can be in skilled and you can be in proficient, which is their way of saying championship and performance. You can be in either, and when you get to the number of cues needed to earn a title, it's going to be called the same title. So guess what happened? Everybody, except for maybe a few people, dropped their dogs 4 inches. And what's really interesting in NADAC is the top jump height is 20. So when you drop your dog 4 inches, the Border Collie dogs are now all jumping 16. But NADAC also allows you to drop 4 inches if you yourself are over 60 or if your dog is over 7. So the biggest class in NADAC is 12 inches. And that's what all the Border Collies are jumping, with the exception of the young ones with handlers that aren't 60. And me, I've been jumping Dakota 20, although I am going to change that soon, because NADAC courses actually run better when dogs aren't really jumping, the bigger dogs. That the problem I see with me jumping Dakota 20 inches in NADAC is the jumping arc is so much longer for a dog jumping 20 versus 12 that the spacing between the jumps becomes smaller, if that makes sense, right? His takeoff spot is earlier, landing is later, so this 21 feet is now kind of compressed, and he can't really open up. So even though NADAC is supposed to be all about big open spacing, it's only big open spacing if you're jumping your dog 8 inches lower than wither height. So my plan is to drop him from 20 to actually 12 in NADAC. 16 is in his awkward area, that he lands a little bit hard on 16. I can just sense it, and when I see it on videos, there's just something a little awkward about that height. So I will probably go all the way down to 12. And that's not really even jumping. That these dogs, Dakota size, that are doing 12 inches, they're kind of striding over these bars. But I believe that NADAC runs better over these low bars, and spacing is more vast. And I think it will also clarify for him when we're running NADEC and when we're running everything else, because having not done much NADEC in the last couple of years and doing a little bit here and there, totally different handling, totally different handling timing, and different skill set and different expectations on the part of the dog. And so I think it will actually be useful for him to go, oh, we're playing this game now and we're playing that game another time. So for those of you who do multiple venues, definitely keep an eye on if your dog's expectations are being blown when you switch venues. I know of one person who said when she switches from USDA to NADAC, it takes her dog the first day to just get used to the different style of course. And same in the other direction. And you know, when I thought about that, I'm like, oh, I don't want to spend a third of my trial time with a dog that's not understanding what I'm doing. But I think this will help clarify that. And, you know, I have to point out one thing, having not done much NADEC and then having done it 2 weekends in a row, that I blew Dakota's mind on one course, that it was a distance course, a challenge course, and I knew I was going to have to lie to him 3 times in a row, and I did, and he went off and sniffed for the first time, and I talked about this in the Q&A on the road, but that is so unusual for him. It was the expression of, you know, you lied once and okay, you mess up once in a while, no big deal. But now second time it's like, oh, okay, I'm still with you. And then this third weirdness, he was just like, I don't know what you're doing. I'm doing this, but I don't understand it. So it was a really valuable, not as much a lesson as a confirmation, how important it is to not mess with our dogs' minds. You know, to maybe have stepped across that line or to have made up my own course. I guess really if I could do it over again, the first time I would have stepped over the line, and the second time we ran the same course, I could have done it from behind the line, and he would have been expecting weirdness, so it wouldn't have blown his mind.